Okay, so it's 7:05 right now Eastern time, so 6:05 in your time, Darien. So guys, welcome back to Rutgers Student Organization for Advancement and Research in the STEM. We wanted to introduce our guest today, Darrion Nguyen, also known as Lab Shenanigans on the online world. And before we start, we wanted to say a little thing about our plans for the fall. So as you guys know, our the university has released that we're going to be online in the fall, and so we're now planning to facilitate an environment where we could have these laboratory discussions and learn a little bit and develop our skills in the lab before we get into the lab. So now, Yashavani, you could go for it.
So we are dedicated to supporting students in their research, and we hope to provide an opportunity to help build the skills needed in a lab environment, like reading past research articles and knowing what about research in general. And we want this experience to be fun and supportive for all individuals, regardless of their discipline. That's why this club was made to foster all STEM research. And we're going to provide individuals with the tools and necessities that allow them to pursue their interest and become the person they dream to be. And now we're gonna introduce Darrion. And Darrion has graduated from the University of Texas, and he has gained a lot of research experience and has become famous on TikTok while making videos about science and research. So now, Darrion, you can share what you have to share with us.
Sorry, I was mute. So I'm gonna leave it like in this. Can I put it in? It's like speaker. This is good, right? Y'all can see me? Good. Okay.
That's perfect.
Cool. So, oh my gosh, thank you for the introduction. I feel so official. Wow. So, like you guys said, my name is Darrion Nguyen. So, some of you guys may know me as the person who runs Lab Shenanigans, and I think like I've been running that social media account for about a year now. And it was kind of just unplanned. Like I never thought that it would be huge. It was just like I'm working as a research tech, let me just post all my like late night shenanigans onto like this Finsta, what used to be a Finsta account. And then surprisingly, people liked my stuff. And so I just continued posting it. I'm like, okay, fine, let me just keep doing this. So yeah, I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 2017. I received my Bachelor's of Science and Arts in Biochemistry and Bachelor of Arts in Theater and Dance. So I started doing research during my sophomore year at UT, which is like around the same time that you guys are now. You guys are incoming sophomores. And I joined a behavioral neuroscience lab studying neuroplasticity, focusing on rehabilitative therapies in stroke-induced mouse models. So yeah, I worked in that lab for 3 years, assisting a graduate student doing like stroke-induced surgeries, conducting motor behavioral assays, and collecting rat brain tissue and sectioning them. So I knew that like during my undergrad that I wanted to receive a PhD, but I didn't know if I wanted to get into med school or grad school. Like if I were to go into med school, I would pursue the MD PhD program or go into grad school to just receive my PhD. So I knew like PhD was in the picture. Junior year, I took my MCAT. I did all right the first time, so I retook it, and then I did well my second time. And then like shadowed several doctors. And I think after I graduated, I still felt like I didn't do enough research because at that time I didn't publish. I mean, I haven't published yet, but I still felt like a little incompetent. So I knew I wanted to take a gap year to just kind of figure things out. So I think the perfect opportunity came for me when like I decided to apply as a research technician. I moved back to Houston, and in Houston we have like the medical center, and I just started looking for labs in the medical center, and I applied for a research tech. Got the position like right on the spot, and then I've been working as a research technician for the past 2.5 years. And then recently, like last September, I decided to apply for grad school. I think like a year in as a research tech, I realized like, yeah, I'm not passionate about medicine. I think I'm more passionate about just the research component, working in a lab. So I applied for grad school, and I accepted an offer from Baylor College of Medicine. Um, I'll be I'll be joining their neuroscience PhD program, not next year or not this upcoming year, but the following year. And I think like about 400 students applied, and 14 students, I guess, like made it. And surprisingly, I feel so like honored to be one of those 14 students. Um, so I guess like the whole reason why I'm telling you guys this whole spiel is that it took me about 6 to 7 years to really figure things out. And I'm still figuring things out. Like, you know, once I get into grad school and once I complete it, like I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. I know that maybe I might want to stay in academia. I'm still contemplating about it. I'm just trying to see how that can fit in with like social media, or like if I can blend the two together. Um, so yeah. So my path is a little peculiar where like I went to undergrad. I worked as a research tech for 2.5 years, and then I'll be entering grad school. I think the more traditional route is like undergrads will will receive their bachelor's and then apply for grad school to get their master's, and then apply to get into a PhD program. So I think in some cases, like hands-on research can equate to education to a master's degree. I think it really depends on how much work you get done. But I think my case is very, I guess, like non-traditional. So starting out in a research lab, I joined my sophomore year, which was 2014. 2014, 6 years ago. And just to describe like a typical lab setting for you guys, there's your principal investigator, your PI, who owns the lab, and you're working in their lab. And then there's a postdoctoral researcher or a postdoc. They received their PhD already, but they're just wanting to gain more research experience. Your lab manager, I like to think that they're the backbone of the lab, who make sure that like all the reagents, all the chemicals are like fully stocked. Your research assistant, grad students, research technician, and some undergrads. So a lot of the labs that are like at institutions will most likely, I guess, like most of the time, will accept undergrad students. And I think like the biggest question for you to figure out when joining a lab is, what kind of research interests you? Like, are you interested in neurodevelopmental diseases or neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's? So exactly what are you focusing on, and what are you interested in? And then after you decide that you're interested in this particular field, look up like a list of PIs in their labs at your institution and just see what they're studying. And the ones that stick out to you, just send them an email. I think that's actually the best option. My school had like a little portal where you can apply for labs, and PIs can use that portal to see if they want to accept undergrads. I think the best way is just to directly email the PIs. Either if you're like wanting to work in a lab as an undergrad or work in a lab like as a research tech. For me, when I got this position, I didn't apply directly through like the job opening. Rather, I just sent a PI out on a whim. I said like, hey, my name's Darrion Nguyen. I graduated from UT, received this. I have training in this, and this. I know that you're studying X, Y, and Z. And I was wondering if you're hiring any research technicians. And most of the time they will reply and they'll say, yes, I'm interested, or sorry, we don't have enough funding, or we just hired someone new. So I think most of the time they will reply if you just send them an email directly. I think you have a higher chance of getting into a lab if you contact them this way than applying. Just because, like, also when you apply for a job, most of the time or I guess sometimes you can get filtered out by the system. And to bypass that filter, you just go directly to the PI. Another thing is, like, once you find out what lab you're interested in, and you're interested in their type of research, also like question what animal models are they working on. I think that's pretty important because depending on the animal that you work on, it can be a little tedious and it can take a long time to like get a paper out, or really, yeah, to get a paper out. Like anything that pertains to like rodents, that can take a long time. But I think research with like fruit flies can be fairly quick, or roundworms. Also, I think it's important to know what animals that you might be working with, because sometimes your allergies can get in the way. My undergrad lab, we had a postdoc who worked on a project for like, I think 5 or 6 years. And then she would always complain about working with rats because eventually she developed like really, really bad allergies to rats. And then another thing is, when you're, before even sending PIs these emails, make sure to read like a couple of their papers so that you have a general idea of their background. Also like the general techniques that are employed in that lab. So yeah, definitely read their papers. And I think starting out research in an undergrad setting is very important, because you can learn the general techniques that you learn in like the laboratory class setting, I would say is hands down applicable to like the research setting. So everything that you learn, like, I don't know if you guys learned this yet because you guys are incoming sophomores, but like running PCR or electrophoresis or Western blot, I didn't learn that till my sophomore, junior year at UT. And I didn't start like actually doing all of that until probably 2 years ago. So definitely like everything that you're learning in a class setting, conceptually remember it. For me, I know that like I just memorize it on the spot just to get by that class, to get an A, and then I forgot about it. But then now that I'm like actually doing research, I do PCR, electrophoresis, Western blots all the time. So definitely everything that you're learning in the class setting, remember it, because I can tell you it's going to come back and you're going to use it daily. Okay, so after graduating in 2017, I wanted to gain more research experience. Despite the fact that I worked in a lab for 3 years, I felt like I needed to do more. I didn't publish. So I sent my PI an email asking if she wanted a research tech, and she was just getting her own lab. So I came at a pretty much perfect time. And I think like when you're applying for these labs, also be completely honest with your intentions on joining this lab. So some of you guys might be wanting to get into med school to do like the MD PhD program. Some of you guys might want to just get into grad school. And I knew I wanted to get into grad school. So I wanted to find a position where my biochem degree was, I guess, relevant, but also I wanted to just gain more research experience. So I just told my PI that, like, hey, I know that down the line I am applying for grad school. Can I please take on a project where I can learn, and also to learn more techniques, learn how to conduct a project or do a project. And so I came at a really good time where she just gave me my own project, and I really learned a lot during these past 2 years. And I know like sometimes med students will apply to med school and not get in, and they plan to take like a gap year, and they need to like just fill their gap year with something that's relevant to their degree. So they'll apply to a research lab and kind of just, I guess, like lie their way in, say, yeah, like I'm really interested in research. And then they get into the lab, and then halfway through they decide to reapply for med school, find out they get in, don't tell the lab, and then last minute just like chuck deuces and say, hey, I didn't tell you guys this, but I applied for med school. I got in. I'm sorry, I didn't tell y'all earlier, but like I'm ready to leave. And like it puts like a bad dent in the lab, because you generally like that research tech or whatever position or whatever position they are, like it just leaves a lot of, I guess, responsibilities to like, it pushes it to someone else. And it's a little, I guess, like a little inconsiderate. So definitely like lay out your intentions to the PI and at the same time tell them like what you expect from the lab. So for me, like, hey, I'm wanting to take a gap year or two to figure things out, to gain more research experience. I know that down the line, I'm either going to apply for grad school or med school. So like, can I please take on a project so that I can gain more experience? And I think that's the best way to go. Just always be honest and state how long you're willing to work before you go into med school, grad school. So I told my PI, like, yeah, I'm planning to like stay for a year or two. And for her, like her minimum requirement was 2 years. So I was like, okay, 2 years sounds good because I mean, it makes sense. It takes about 6 months to really learn to adapt yourself to that lab setting and also get trained on everything in the lab. So it just doesn't make sense if you stay for a year or get trained for 6 months and then leave 6 months later. So for like specifically my lab, it's a 2-year minimum requirement. And yeah, like I said, I learned a lot during this period. And my first year, like my interest in not only like this lab, this project, but just like in research in general grew. So I ultimately decided to apply for grad school instead of med school. And then, yeah, I took a project on my own. And right now I'm kind of wrapping things up with this project and I'm in the process of writing a paper in which I'll be first author on. And as a research tech, for my position, like the basic job duties include just maintaining the mouse colony. So setting up mating cages, weaning the mice, euthanizing them, genotyping them, conducting mouse behavioral assays. But since I'm also taking on a project, like I come in almost every day and I work at least like 10-hour work days. So it's my basic research tech duties on top of like, I guess, grad student duties too, to constantly read papers, to do other experiments to keep my project going. So in the lab setting, we also have what are called lab meetings, where I think almost every lab has lab meeting where every person, or I guess one person will present like a formal presentation and just update everyone on their project. And it's about an hour long. It's a very formal presentation, and it's a nice way to get feedback from the entire lab. Like they question your data, they give you advice on how to better your projects, your experiments. So lab meetings are every week and people cycle in and out. So my lab is pretty small. We have like 4 people. So I present like once a month, but there are other labs that are like pretty big and they present, I think the same person will present like once every 3 or 6 months. So it depends on the size of the lab, but just know that lab meetings are pretty common. And another common thing is journal club. Journal club, I like to think of it as like book club, where instead of like everyone reading the same journal and we talk about like, or reading the same book and we talk about the book, one person is assigned to read a journal and they can choose whatever journal they want. For our lab, we try to find a journal that pertains to like our project or that's related to our project. So one person will read a paper and within like 30 minutes, they'll explain the rationale, the concept of that paper and quickly go through the figures. Journal club kind of varies between each organization, each lab. But the importance of journal club is that it allows us to keep up with the research that's out there. So like any new technology or techniques that are used in experiments you can learn that through journal club, which is like reading journals. It also inspires research labs to adopt a certain strategy or push a project in a certain direction. And for me, before even working as a research tech, I think I only read one paper as an undergrad. And I read that paper for a class, and that's it. But once I started this position, it was very common to read like a journal every week. And let me tell y'all, like my first journal, like I did not understand anything from it. It's so like it was so dense. But if you keep reading papers and journals, you'll get the hang of it, and you just have to build a strong foundation of understanding how to dissect complex papers because it's so like heavy with all these techniques that you haven't learned yet. And so the first paper you'll read, you'll have to like read other papers to understand a specific figure. And once you keep reading papers, you'll build like this repertoire of all these techniques that you've learned and read from other papers. So yeah, it helps you dissect complex papers and to understand how to, I guess, like scientifically tell a story. And another thing that you learn, I guess, subconsciously is how to put figures together, and you'll understand exactly why some figures are in the paper and then other figures are in the supplementary figure or supplementary paper. So, and then also reading like the different types of papers from different journals will help you understand like how each understand like the format of each journal, like for nature or science. And the organization of journal club is different for every lab. Some have very like formal PowerPoint presentations where one person is standing in front of the room and they're presenting a PowerPoint. Our lab is pretty informal where we just sit around like at a table and we all like have printed out papers, and then whoever's presenting will just go through the paper and go through the figures. And that's what our lab does. And instead of having one person present, we actually have two people present. So in one journal club, like I'll present for 30 minutes and then the next person will present for 30 minutes. And I know like there's another lab where I think every member of the lab, they have about like 10 members. Every member in their lab presents for journal club where every person is allotted about 10 minutes to present their paper. And there's a balance to it. The idea is that the more people that present, the more you get, I guess, the more papers you cover, but also it kind of glosses over certain specific techniques. But if one person is presenting, you go into like depth for, you go into like the specifics of a paper, but you're not really covering a lot of different type of journals. So there's really a balance to it. And I think it depends on like the dynamic of your lab, the size of your lab as well, and also everyone's like willingness to participate. Because there are some labs that will like, I think they'll have journal club for 2 to 3 hours. I think I heard, I met a candidate during one of my interviews whose like journal club lasted for 4 hours. And maybe in their lab, like they love reading papers and they don't mind talking, discussing papers for 4 hours. But for our lab, we like to do it for like about an hour and a half. And working as a research tech, like I learned how to kind of balance my experiments to overlap my experiments. I like to compare my experience in lab as with the game Overcooked, where there are just so many things going on. But like, I think work as a research tech, you learn how to balance it all and multitask. And at the same time, while you have like downtime or when you're like home to read papers, and also you learn how to squeeze in seminars, conferences, and then with my position, or I guess like as undergrads, grad students, postdocs, you'll like present at some conferences, and then I learned how to like put figures together for posters and papers, which I thought was going to be easy when I came in, but there's kind of like an art to it, surprisingly. So yeah, working as a research tech taught me how to think critically and also helped me acquire skills I find necessary and pertinent to grad school. So then moving forward, I applied for several PhD programs and I decided to accept an offer from Baylor College of Medicine. And my process, I think the process of applying for grad school is fairly simple. It's similar to like applying to, I guess like undergrad, where you have your personal statement, and then another essay that you have to write is called a research statement. So, your personal statement describes like your upbringing and what motivates you to get into grad school. But your research statement is an essay about like the history of your research experience, the future direction of like where you're planning to go with your research, and it'll describe also like the potential of your work. For undergrad, like you take your ACTs and your SATs. For grad school, you take your GRE. But I know that there's like a handful of grad school programs that actually don't accept or don't necessarily require you to take the GRE. And Baylor College of Medicine was one of the schools that didn't require it. So that's also another reason why I applied, because I didn't take the GRE. And then with what's going on, like with my social media presence and stuff, I opened up like my little own merch shop, and surprisingly, like everything's been going very well, and the business has been keeping me busy along with like my research. So I'm planning to defer for a year to just focus solely on like social media stuff, my brand, merch store. So I won't be attending grad school this upcoming cycle, but I'll be attending the following year. And once I get my PhD, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. Still figuring things out, and hopefully, like along the way, when I'm in grad school, I'll realize, okay, I might stay in academia, I might not. We'll have to see. It's one thing that I'm figuring out, but I know that long term, I'm wanting to stay in the lab environment. Research is really fun, but also it's very stressful, and I'm not entirely sure if I want to like run my own lab. Like I said, I'm just still kind of figuring things out. But that's pretty much like all I have planned for today. And if you guys have any questions, like I will be more than glad to answer some of them. But yeah, like I feel so honored that you guys invited me here.
So we have a comment asking about COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
So someone's asking about how with COVID-19 being at large right now, and students not being allowed on campus or in labs, what would you recommend for students to do to supplement their experience and to express their interest in this environment?
That's a really good question. So there are some programs offered by certain universities and institutions that have like virtual online lab programs. I think with Baylor College of Medicine, they had the SMART program, which is an acronym, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what it stands for, but all the work that they're doing is virtual. So for example, I'm mentoring a student right now, Vanessa. It'll be cool if she's watching this, but I'm pretty sure she's not. But anyway, so with all of the stuff that I'm doing in labs, so I'm considered an essential, worker. So I come into lab almost every day, and I do all my experiments, and I gather all the data. But for anything that requires like analyzing data, I give a portion of that to my mentee, Vanessa, and that's her own like small project. She's rotating in our lab for like, I think she's been here for about 2 months now. And so that's one of the things that you can do. You can look into like bioinformatics labs, or look into labs that like require to have, I guess, heavy quantifications or data analysis. Another thing you can do is also like just read a lot of papers. I think my best guess is email a lab, ask them if they're interested in taking in some undergrad students, and they can try to figure something out for you. And I think it'll most likely be like data analysis. So yeah.
We have another comment. Someone just asked, what are you currently doing in Baylor College of Medicine? What is your research like? Can you give us a little snippet about it?
Okay, that's yeah. So I guess I didn't really talk about my project. I just kind of glossed over a little bit, and the reason why I didn't go into depth about it is because now that I'm putting my paper together, my PI and I are kind of afraid of getting scooped. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that term, but like we found something very novel that we hope no one else found. And we are just we're just racing with like the unknown to try to do all our experiments and quickly write this paper together to submit it. But anyway, my project involves studying a transcription factor that regulates cerebellar development. And we've focused mostly on mice. So we generated like a constitutive knockout mouse model. We knocked out my gene of interest. We saw all these phenotypes. And then now I like recently generated a conditional knockout mouse model. And we're interestingly seeing some phenotypes that I'm planning to characterize. So yeah, that's like a brief, I guess, tip of the iceberg, a snippet of my project that I'm doing right now.
So another comment is, how do you propose a research topic to a university professor? I know it's kind of a weird question. I guess what they're trying to say is, like, how do you go on to have an independent project eventually?
I see. I've never been in that scenario, nor have I seen like someone do it. But I think you just have to be like really open with your PI and just talk to them and ask them like, hey, I feel like I've gathered enough experience to take on my own project. Is there enough money for me to take on my own project? And two, like, do you believe in me? Like, do you think I'm capable of taking on my own project? And they should believe in you. But if they have doubts, then like prove them wrong. But then it just opens up another discussion. Like, why do they, I guess, like doubt you? But really just talk to your PI. And I want to say like they most of the time will allow you to take on a project of your own.
And to add to that, sometimes it's kind of your limitations. You might not have enough experience or be well educated in that environment. So
Right.
if they say no, you might need to do a further research, but that's not going to limit you in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my lab, we have lab meetings every Friday. We do kind of like a mix of journal club plus like kind of like updating our lives. What does your lab meetings look like?
So our lab meetings are Monday mornings at 8:30, and
Oh no.
and I hate it because the days leading up to lab meeting for me can be a little nerve-wracking. So I like to call it get my shit together days. So I will like spend the entire weekend to put together my presentation. And like sometimes I want to just like spend the weekend relaxing. So like having lab meetings on Fridays, in my opinion, is better so that you can spend the weekdays putting it together and then enjoy, once you're done presenting for lab meeting, then you can spend the rest of the weekend to just relax. So for us, when we have our lab meetings on Monday mornings at 8:30, we go over like lab business, meaning are we running low on any reagents? Do we need to order anything new? Has this order come in yet? And like any additional experiments. And then once we get our like lab business out of the way, then whoever's prepared to, or I guess scheduled to present their presentation will present. And that generally goes for like about an hour and a half. And then after they're done presenting, the whole lab kind of provides feedback. And all the feedback is always like positive. It's always like a friendly environment. I like to think of like lab as your second family. They're there to help you. And that's the whole point of lab meetings, so that you update everyone on your project and that they also critique your experiments to make sure that you quantified or analyzed everything correctly. So it really is to help better yourself. Yeah, I guess like better yourself.
And you talked briefly about something called Journal Club. So
Yeah.
are you SOARS? We're trying to turn this into a kind of journal club, but supplementing some kind of lab skills before you get into a lab. What are some skills that you think students should be actively working and preparing themselves before they get into a lab?
That's good. I guess this probably like I say is pretty general and pretty broad. But like a good work ethic. So I think with like my institution, a lot of the undergrads that work in labs generally work under a grad student and actively communicate with the grad student and plan things out. And like for me, I had like a schedule where I would have a schedule to conduct these motor behavioral assays in rats. And it's kind of like a job where like you are scheduled, you have to come in and you cannot flake. And I've seen students do that, like because they'll join a lab to just put on their resume that they joined a lab. And so that's, for me, it's a huge no-no, and it defeats the whole purpose of being in a research lab. You should join because you genuinely care about the research. So I think that's like my bottom line rule is like have a good work ethic. Another thing is to really like everything you learn in the classroom lab setting, just look into it, study, and remember it because it's always going to be applicable and it's always going to come back to haunt you. So like, learning how to do PCR, running gels, Western blots, Southern blots. So all of that. And then I think a lot of undergrads can get like a head start of starting to read research journals and learning how to dissect them. My first paper that I read, I didn't understand a lot of it. So I ended up having to read almost all the papers that they cited so that I can just understand one panel of the figure. So that's another thing that I think a lot of undergrads can do to get a head start.
Okay. And we have two more questions. So the first one is, how did you narrow down what research interested you the most?
So this sounds this sounds kind of dumb, but like I've always been fascinated with the brain. And like I've always been interested with the brain scientifically, like understanding the anatomy, the function of the brain. If you damage the brain, how does that affect behavior? But I also like the brain because like I also like studying how the brain affects behavior. So like that's why I became interested in theater. And it's two separate paths, but like I feel like the common ground is like it has to deal with brain and behavior. And I knew I wanted to focus on something behavior, brain related. So that pushed me to study behavioral neuroscience as an undergrad. Despite the fact that like I majored in biochemistry, I never took a neuroscience class. So my first neuroscience class is going to be when I'm in grad school, surprisingly. So a lot of my neuroscience, I guess, background comes from just like reading papers and doing hands-on experiments, talking to other grad students, undergrads, and learning through them. So that was kind of like my first hook, just working in a neuroscience and behavioral neuroscience lab, and then seeing how fun that was. I realized, okay, like I definitely want to focus on neuroscience. But then when I started this position, our lab is a blend of genetics and neuroscience. So then once I decided to apply for grad school instead of med school, the next obstacle was, do I apply for the genetics department or do I apply for the neuroscience department? Neuroscience is very like focused on just the brain. So what's nice is that like if you're to attend a neuroscience seminar, you can almost understand it immediately because it's dealing with the brain. Whereas genetics is such a broad subject that, you know, if you walk in the middle of a presentation, sometimes you can just like, you won't understand it immediately. So that was like one obstacle for me to just kind of figure out what am I interested in. So after months of contemplating, I decided to apply for the neuroscience PhD program. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's a pretty long journey. So another question is, do you think it's beneficial to stay in the lab for long term, like 4 years from your undergrad, if you're planning on applying to medical school or graduate school?
I think you'd have to think about yourself. Like, you'd have to think like, what else are you going to gain from that lab if you work there long term? So for me, I knew that if I stayed with my lab for 2 years, I can get at least 2 years, I can get a paper out. If you stay in that lab for 4 years, are you going to learn anything new? Are you going to get a paper out? I think you have to think like, what is the end goal of working in that lab long term? Yeah, because you can work in a lab for 4 years and not get a paper out, and it'll look good that you were committed to the lab, but I think you have to also look out for yourself and try to find like kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel.
And what if you could go back to undergrad, what would be one thing you could change, or one helpful advice that you would give yourself?
I think so now that I know that like I want to stay in like research, I love theater. Don't get me wrong. Like I feel like a part of me, like my theater side is still present in like social media, but I wish that like I focus a little less on theater and focus a little bit more on research. Because I didn't take on my own project. I spent 3 years working under a grad student, but I felt like if I had more time, I would have asked to take on a project of my own and then maybe like produce a paper from that lab. So I think that's if I could go back in time, I would tell myself that.
Now, you had a double major in biochemistry and theater.
Yeah.
How was that in terms of like stress or work ethic for you? Was it like very stressful? How did you even balance it? I mean, I'm looking at double major or a major and a minor. I'm like, well, this is too much on me.
I'm gonna answer this question by tying in the previous question answer. So I also wish like I could like tell my freshman self to apply for the theater department early on, because I didn't apply for the theater department until my sophomore year. And by then, like my theater and dance advisor was like, LOL, you actually have too many credits. So we don't think if we accept you into the theater department, we don't think you'll be able to graduate within 4 years. And the theater department was very strict on like, you have to graduate within 4 years, like no more than 4 years. And I was like, no, I can graduate within 4 years. Like, believe me. And they're like, well, how? Like, here's a little like template of your 4 years. Please write out your whole schedule and we'll see if it's feasible for you to complete all your classes within 4 years. So I had to petition to get into the theater department. And then once I petitioned, I got in. And so I didn't take my first theater classes until my junior year. So my junior year and my senior year, for both fall and spring semesters for each year, I took at least 19 hours. I think the most hours I took in one semester was my senior year, and I took 23 hours. And it was super stressful, but it was also really fun. Like it was very rewarding. And I think it's because these are the two things that I'm truly passionate in. And so I didn't see it as like a hassle. When like I'm stressed from like my science classes, going to my theater classes were so fun. And I'm not trying to like shade theater classes, but they're an easy A. Like, it's really, or at least UT. And I'm trying not to shade UT, but it's like as long as you try your best, here's your A. So I didn't have to worry about trying too hard in my theater classes, but I did try hard because like I genuinely cared. But it was just reassuring to know that I didn't have to try as long as I put in the effort. Like it's an easy A. Whereas like my science classes, you have to really try to get the A, and you can try all you want, and sometimes the A will not come. So think really like the underlying theme is that you just have to be passionate. As long as you're passionate, stress is going to be a byproduct, and it won't be too bad. But yeah.
Hmm. Definitely agree with you. I like 100%. If it's not something that you're interested in and dedicated to, it might not be worth to go through that avenue. You have to be very, you want to be happy in the end, and
Right.
that's exactly what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
Now, you said that you were pre-med. How was uh how was it being a pre-med and a theater kid? I know like that's pretty untraditional for someone to be a non-bio uh I mean you did do a science major, but how was it being both a pre-med and a theater? Was there something that you faced as pre-med that you could share with us or talk to us about?
I think, okay, so ironically, it taught me to be humble. And I say that because you know how there's that like stereotype that pre-meds are like will flaunt like, oh yeah, I have a 3.9 GPA. Oh my God, I'm gonna fail this class with a 96. Like, I, I'm not gonna lie. I used to be that pre-med kid. So I don't know if y'all see it on like my social media, but I shit on pre-med students all the time because I used to be that pre-med student. And I would flaunt around like my theater degree and my biochemistry degree, like, yes. And I think after a while, like there was a moment where like I got like a slap in the face, like, dude, you need to like stop bragging. And that was my moment when I got like my humble pie slice, and I realized like, yeah, I need to stop doing that. Like it's not going to benefit anyone if I keep doing this. So um yeah, so I would always like just, I guess, like tell my theater cohorts, like, yeah, when the first day of class, when you go around the room and say your name, your major, and an interesting fact about yourself, I would always be like, yeah, my name's Darrion. I'm pre-med theater. And I would always use, so if I'm like in the theater department, I would say like, oh yeah, I'm pre-med. So like it interests them. And then when I'm in like my science classes, like, oh, I'm pre-med theater. So like it just, when I look back, like I'm thinking, why did I do that? Like, why was I so annoying? So ironically, all of that has taught me to be humble now. So I just, unless someone asks me, I don't talk about what I'm doing. So yeah, it taught me to be humble.
That's a very good answer. I actually didn't expect that. And I think that might be all we have for you right now. We thank you so much, Darian. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us and giving us this very well, very like a very great talk. And I know like we kind of put you on the spot with these questions that you didn't
No,
expect.
no, I enjoyed it, dude. This was fun. I liked it.
And do you want to plug yourself in the? We already put like your links and
Oh,
stuff like that in the comments.
I guess, yeah. So if you guys want or whatever, you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. It is lab_shenanigans. I just post stupid videos. So if you want to watch me post stupid videos, follow me. Also,
Thank
note that I always post my stuff late at night. That's because because literally they're just like late night shenanigans. But yeah, if you guys want to, please follow me: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, lab_shenanigans.
Thank you so much, Darian. We really appreciate you. That was pretty awesome, I have to say.
Thank you so much. All
Okay,
right.
and here I'm gonna end the live stream. Uh, Avantika, can you end the live stream?